Hi everyone, this is Monday reading for week 5, the First Fleet ships, and there's 5 pages of information. There's quite a lot, so I've decided to read through with you and just point out some tricky new vocabulary or new words. Please make sure you read this yourself if you feel confident, but if you want to read along with me, that's fine as well. I really love this topic this week. First Fleet is really exciting learning about how these people from England came to Australia. It's a very different life to what we have now. So this is the transportation. The convicts, including the child prisoners who were sentenced to transportation, transport meaning movement, were transferred from jails or hulks to the convict ships called transports. These ships took them to the penal, think of prisoner, colony of Australia. So it was set up like a town in New South Wales in Sydney just for convicts. So they called it a penal colony, think punishment. On the transports, conditions inside transport ships were terrible. Children and adults were chained below deck until the ship was well away from land. There were buckets for toilets and no privacy. Rations of bread, beef, butter, and dried peas were given out daily. The children usually got half or quarter the amount given to an adult. They wouldn't have had any fresh food, no fridges, any way to keep anything cold. In daylight, prisoners were usually allowed on deck to wash and exercise. Remember, they would have washed from a little bucket. At night and in stormy weather, the hatches, doors to the upper deck, were locked down. Seasick or diseased convicts lay in their own waste and vomit. Oh, yuck. Doctors on board were paid by the ship's owners and often ignored bad treatment of prisoners. The doctors could treat prisoners badly. But after 1815, government doctors were put on the ships and conditions on the transports improved. So unless children could find an adult to protect them, their food would often be stolen. This is after the First Fleet too, when prisoners were sent to Australia. There were many fleets of ships sent. On the second page, transportation aboard the First Fleet from England to Australia took over 7 months. Here the fleet arrives in Sydney Harbour at last. So it's an image painted of what it would have looked like. Notice there's no buildings. It's all beautiful and natural. Death on the ships. Scurvy, which is a type of itchy sort of disease. Dysentery, which is like diarrhea, and typhoid, which is a terrible sickness. Killed many children on the ships. Oh, by the way, today we've got vaccines for typhoid, so very different to then. Starvation was also a risk. On the dreadful Second Fleet, which sailed to Australia in 1789, a year later, around 300 of the 1,280 convicts who set sail died on the ships. Isn't that sad? The worst death rate on a transport was in 1799 on the Hillsborough, a ship bound for New South Wales. Of the 300 convicts who left England, 95 died at sea of typhoid. It reminds me a bit of the cruise ships today where people get sick and it all gets passed around. There were 9 child convicts aboard the First Fleet, so that's the first lot of boats that came out. They were, and you can read through, Sylvester Carthy, aged 11, not very old, he's an errand boy, someone who does jobs. James Grace, aged 11, a shoemaker. John Halfpenny, aged 12, a bootmaker's boy. John Hudson, aged 12, a chimney sweep. Mary Branham, aged 13, a servant. Elizabeth Hayward, aged 13, a servant. Charles Carey, aged 14, an errand boy. John Owen, age 14, job unknown. Samuel Payton, age 14, stonemason, so we cut stone. They had jobs, but they probably were caught stealing because they're very poor. Women and girls, female transports were dangerous places. Guards were always male and often abused or hurt their prisoners. Women and girls who had babies on board had little medical help, so not much medicine or doctors to help. If a baby's mother died, the infant starved to death unless another mother could breastfeed him or her. And that's sad. So it's very different to today. Sickness. Many children became sick during the ship voyage. In 1839, 3 of Ellen Morgan's 4 children died of starvation because they could not eat the dried and salted food eaten by the adults, and there was no cow on board for milk. In 1852, the ship Wanata suffered an outbreak of the contagious disease scarlet fever. 33 of the 39 who died were children. Women who gave birth on board had the ship's doctor to help them, but even so many newborn babies died. So this is later on. Ships just kept getting sent out each year full of prisoners. A hard journey. This sad father wrote home to England to tell of the death of his son. We had 4 children. The youngest was 3 months old, a boy, but he died on the sea about a month after we started. It was a great trial for us at the time, but it proved a blessing to us as we had to suffer for want of food before we got to Sydney. So strangely, I mean, it sounds horrible, but the dad is saying because our baby died, we didn't even have enough food for us. The ship life in 1883, so this is nearly 10 years later, migrants followed a strict timetable. Children helped their parents with the chores on board the ship. So later on, free people would come over to Australia, and they were called migrants rather than prisoners or convicts. So 6 a.m. the women and children are up on deck. 6:30 to 7 a.m. men bringing bedding up on deck to air, keep it nice and fresh and clean. 8 a.m. breakfast. 9 a.m. men wash dishes. 10 till 12 sleeping berths and passengers scrubbed out. Women do washing. Women cook lunch. 12:30 p.m. men fetch rations from the ship's store. 1 p.m. dinner, or would have been lunch. 2:30 till 5 p.m. free time, and 5 p.m. tea. It says meal times were dangerous for little children on board migrant ships, as this picture from 1882 shows. Many children were scalded by spilt food. Oh, that's horrible. Remember, they're rocking around on ships. So even later as ships came out to Australia, it wasn't an easy journey. So let's look at the First Fleet again, though. There were 2 Royal Navy vessels. That's where all the Marines or the officers would stay and travel on, and they probably swapped duties on the convict ships. The HMS Sirius and the HMS, standing for Her Majesty's Service Supply. There were 3 store ships, the Golden Grove, the Fishburne and the Borrowdale. 6 convict ships, Alexander, Charlotte, Friendship, Lady Penrhyn, Prince of Wales and the Scarborough. And this convict shows them all here about how many were on each. The first fleet of 11 ships set sail, led by Captain Arthur Phillip and Captain John Hunter on board the HMS Sirius. There were 2 armed Navy warships, the Sirius and Supply, 6 convict transport ships and 3 ships carrying supplies. Some of the same information again. You can see there's a lot of boats. That's why they called it a fleet. About 200 Marines plus 45 wives and children were scattered throughout the fleet to keep order. So there were free people that came, people who weren't prisoners. The people and the equipment, 1,500 people. That's a lot. Convicts, Marines, seamen, civil officers and free people. Animals, we had 7 horses, 29 sheep, 74 swine, which are pigs, 6 rabbits and 7 cattle. Yet today, rabbits are everywhere. Now remember, they would have picked up some of these supplies in South Africa at the bottom before they came over to Australia, so they didn't have a long trip. Food and supplies, we've got ropes, crockeries like pottery and plates and things, agricultural equipment like tools and gardening things, tools for building. They would have had hammers or saws, seeds, spirits, which are sort of like drinks, like alcohol, but that was also used for medical things because it would kill off bacteria. So they'd often use spirits not just for drinking but for medicine. Medical supplies and bandages and things, surgical instruments, people getting hurt, handcuffs, leg irons, that's what they put around the prisoners' legs, and other miscellaneous items. Miscellaneous means random or different. And you can see here some of the things that they've got. salted beef, everything had to be salted or dry because we've got no fridges anywhere. Even in town, they used to salt everything if they didn't have it fresh. Okay, and you can see some plants they'd picked up, clothing. They didn't get the women's dresses, they used sacks instead, tools, and then shelter. Now, a lot of their tools weren't great for the harsh Australian tough rocky soil. In Captain Phillips' cabin, make sure all the convicts get fresh vegetables. I don't want sickness on my ships. Aye, aye, Captain. So Captain Arthur Phillip was renowned for being a very good leader. Okay, and this is later on. So using all that information, just showing you this page because you're going to write about life on board the First Fleet. So coming back over those pages, you can think about what it might have been like. And I've written an example here. Life on board the Lady Penrhyn is horrendous. We're writing like it's happening, or like you're there. Our cells are mouldy, filthy, and disgusting, with almost no light or fresh air. Last week, we docked at the Cape of Good Hope. It was freezing cold. It's right at the bottom of Africa. My feet felt like ice, and my friend and I huddled with our ragged blanket to try and keep warm. Night times are the worst because they're eerie sounds. The boat rocks and creaks. People cough, and sometimes I feel rats nibbling at my toes. I've become used to the smell, but at first it would make me sick. We only have buckets for toilets, and people get sick constantly. So, as you are doing this writing later on today, use this table here and read some of these things to help you write about your own experience. So don't just copy this one, but you might get ideas from that. You might want to take a sentence from it. You might want to start with something like life on board and you can pick a ship. Oh, now you're not going to be on the captain's ship, so you might want to check which one. That was the female convicts. You could be on the Alexander or the Charlotte. You wouldn't be on the Sirius or the Supply because they were not carrying convicts. So as you're writing, doing this task later on today, have a read through, but you can use that table to write a descriptive text about the First Fleet. And so you're going to pretend you're a convict and give an account of what it's like on the ship, what you see, smell, hear, and feel. Include what you ate, how you felt, what you saw, and what you did on board. What were other convicts like? Maybe you met someone. Describe the guards and the Marines. Try and use descriptive sentences with adjectives, adverbs, and phrases. You might say, I lived in a dark, crowded, cramped cell for many, many months, and it felt horrible and smelly and scary. Then it says to write in first person, so you're going to do I and we. And in past tense, we sailed, we slept. Not now I'm coming to Australia, but you were writing like it happened. So when I travelled to this place, New South Wales, it was terrible on the boat. So you're writing like a journal. And then write your final copy on the boat page. I'll show you that one now, this one here. So that's for later today. I hope you like our reading about the boats, and hopefully you can write a bit of a description yourself using all of this information. And I look forward to reading that. If you get stuck, please send me a message and I'll see how I can help you. Well done with your reading today and good luck with your writing. Goodbye.